Hi, everyone. Thank you again for the invitation, Dr. Vista, and I'm really delighted to be here and especially among such esteemed panelists. So I clearly remember attending this very session last year, and the session provided me with very helpful insight in guiding my publication journey, and I'm very excited to be here today to share my experience. So my name is Marcia Sun, and currently I am studying at Oklahoma State University, pursuing a PhD in educational leadership and policy studies in higher education. And my research interests focus on cross-cultural integration process and developing programs to better support and foster a sense of belonging among international students, retention and access for international students, and the intersections of identities and cultural competencies in higher education. So recently, I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Vista in the publication of the chapters, the book, International Graduate and Doctoral Student Experience, Navigating Relationships and Resources and Resilience. For me, I think the process of selecting the appropriate venue for publications has become increasingly complex due to the proliferation of journals, areas of specialization, and emergence of interdisciplinary topics. So for me, I think the first thing I would say that it's very important to join the STAR Scholars Network. And I believe Dr. Pissa is the vice president for the STAR Scholars Network. So once you join, you will have access to various opportunities to consider your venue for publication, such as the annual global conference, the Journal of International Students, the Journal of Comparative International Higher Education, Routledge Study of Global Student Mobility, and Journal of Trauma Studies in Education, just to name a few. So after researching on this topic, I have four factors that I keep in mind when selecting the venue or journal that is a good match for my research. So the first question I ask myself is, what are the aims and scopes of the venue and journal, like my colleague Liz said. So I think this information is usually readily available on the journal's homepage, and I usually look for the section title about the journal or full aims and scope or something similar to that. And then browsing through this page will provide me with key information about whether my research might be a good match for the journal. So the second question I ask myself is, has the journal published articles that are similar to my work? So once you have identified a few journals you might like to publish your work, your manuscript based on their broad aims and scope, consider performing a search with the keywords or titles of your manuscript to determine whether the journal has published work that are similar to yours. So I try to aim to identify 3 to 5 papers published within the last 5 years to try to determine whether these papers are similar to my research in terms of quality and scope, and identifying previous published papers in my specific sub area is an excellent evidence that your research topic is of interest to the audience of that particular venue, which will increase the chances of review. So the third question I ask myself is, what are the journal's restrictions? I think it's really essential to check the information for author section for your targeted venue or journal to determine the restrictions. And sometimes it's very important to know that restrictions are also related to word count. So, and I remember Liz and I had trouble really concising our manuscript to fit the size of the restriction for the authors. So the fourth question I asked myself is, what is the journal's impact factor? So the validity of the journal's impact factor as a matrix for journal quality is controversial due to many factors that can influence the rating achieved, and the fact that not all of these factors are directly related to the quality of publication within the journal. This is the reason that I consider this as my last factor. However, the impact factor remains as a default method for determining the quality and reputation of a journal. So just in conclusion, so after all the hard work that goes into performing a successful research, the final crucial step is to choose the right venue to publish. So I read that there are over 9,500 journals in the directory of open access journal alone. So I think choosing the best one can be very daunting. So I think keeping in mind the 4 points that I talked about, the aims and scope, identifying the paper that are similar in quality and scope, and then determining the restrictions, and the fourth one, considering the impact factor and the potential reach, could ensure a smoother pathway to publication.
Thank you so much to hear both from the scholars, doctoral student and faculty in the room, and also practitioner is eye-opening. I do have one more questions if anybody wants to chime in regarding the improving the quality of the research papers and making them more appealing. Panelists have touched some of the aspect. We want to take one or two responses quickly. Anybody's okay?
If I could just write the opening and just
Please.
get going, and then go back to the opening at the end and make it the strongest, most compelling 2 paragraphs you can write. Like really, you think about the amount of papers that people have to review, and I've been on a couple conferences for my own professional, and it's really about getting started. So just whatever the opening gets you started, that's great, but then go back and make sure that the opening's really strong. I think that's people have when you look at journals and how they're published, really 2-3 paragraphs is all you see on that first page, and you have 2 and 3 paragraphs to get people to the rest of the article.
I totally agree with that. I think even before that, and this goes back to some of Marcia's points, really reviewing the manuscript submission guidelines. Each journal is going to have different guidelines, maybe different formatting styles that they use, and different page lengths, making sure that your manuscript is prepared according to those guidelines. I would also recommend that you have a colleague, multiple people review and give feedback on your paper before you submit it. I would say for me as a reviewer and as an editor, before I even start reading it, I will get a sense of if the paper or the manuscript is going to be good just by the quality of how it is prepared. But then certainly, as Michael had mentioned, after reading the first page or 2 pages, if you haven't hooked me in by then, you're not going to hook me in the details later on.
I would just chime in for a little bit. So I think there are several tips that you could consider. So the first one I would say is to have a focus and a vision for your research paper. So I think it's key to successful publishing with a high quality article is to get a vision. So a reason, a purpose for writing the paper in the first place. So once you have a vision for your research, it may be useful for you to write down and keep it in a constant view to remind you of your mission. So the second one tip is to decide on the type of academic article that you want to write. So there are so many options for you to select from when you're considering the prospect of publishing scholarly work. So for writing academic article, you can choose from different types such as empirical research, conceptual or theoretical articles, teaching notes, review papers, field research, technical reports, case studies, analyses, industry reports and reviews, book reviews, commentaries. So I think it's really important to determine the type of article that you want to write about and focus on that. So the last tip that I would say is I know this is very obvious, but the title, abstract, and keywords are very essential because they summarize your research paper. So the title, abstract, and the keywords should be optimized to reflect your main research questions and the purpose of your paper, and then also exhibit publishing trend in a particular field of study, and in terms of the concept used by the other researchers to find papers similar to your articles.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Aribi from Biology Department at Morgan State University. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm so proud of what Dr. Krishna is doing, organizing this. I didn't even know it happens every year. I think at this point, I would love to join the Star Scholars. I love to publish. For a long time, I've not been publishing, and I want to get back into it, and I'm encouraged by knowing that people have gone through challenges writing. I feel so encouraged. So that's my contribution. I think I'm going to be networking with Dr. Krishna and maybe some of the people on the panel. Thank you so much for coming and enlightening and encouraging someone like me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Any other comments, questions you have for me or the panelist?
Oh, you got it. So I am a third-year doctoral student at FAU who was just recently honored as a Holmes Scholar And so one of the things that interests me, in listening to all you talk, and I think it's great and it's wonderful, but there's a fear factor from a student point of view. So how, give me some tips on how students can approach a faculty member who might have similar interests in terms of how they would be willing to work with them.